The Supreme Court hears a landmark case on men in women's sports. Trump tells Iranians that help is on the way, and Bill Clinton may be held in contempt of Congress. I'm Daily Wire Executive Editor John Bickley with Georgia Howe. It's Tuesday, January 13th. This is Evening Wire.
President Trump spoke at an event in Detroit this afternoon, hot on the heels of new economic data. The latest release shows inflation held steady at 2.7%. The numbers support a trend of cooling inflation, which the president was happy to point out today.
As of this morning, core inflation for the past 3 months has been just 1.6%. The numbers we just announced just before I came on stage. And GDP is smashing expectations with the fastest growth for this country in many years.
President Trump also hammered affordability.
I'm going to provide much more detail about our housing policies so that every American who wants to own a home will be able to afford one. This week, I'll announce our healthcare affordability framework that will reduce premiums for millions, of lower drug prices, delivering price transparency and demand honesty and accountability from insurance companies. Inflation has stopped, wages are up, prices are down, our economy is booming like I think you'll see soon, like never before.
The U.S. Supreme Court heard oral arguments earlier today in a landmark case concerning men in women's sports. Here with more is Daily Wire reporter Amanda Prestigiacomo.
The court heard arguments in two consolidated cases that focus on whether these bans to protect girls' sports are constitutional and fall within Title IX. The ruling will have major influence, impacting 27 states that already have laws in place to keep men out of women's sports, and it could also impact laws protecting females' privacy in bathrooms and other spaces. As both sides battled over this question of what is a woman, the conservative justices seem to lean in favor of states being allowed to protect fairness in sports. Here's a standout moment from Justice Alito and a rep for a trans athlete in the Idaho case about how to even define sex.
For equal protection purposes, what does it mean to be a boy or a girl or a man or a woman?
We do not have a definition for the court. What we're saying is that the way it applies in practice is to exclude birth sex males categorically from women's teams, and that there's a subset of those birth sex males where it doesn't make sense to do so according to the state's own interest.
Well, how can a court determine whether there's discrimination on the basis of sex without knowing what sex means for equal protection purposes?
The court is expected to give its ruling by late spring or early summer.
President Trump has signaled overt support for the Iranian protesters, canceling all meetings with their government. Daily Wire reporter Tim Pierce has the latest.
Trump took to Truth Social saying, Iranian patriots, keep protesting. Take over your institutions. Save the names of the killers and abusers. They will pay a big price. He went on to say, help is on the way. The death toll in Iran has now surpassed 2,000 lives. The group Human Rights in Iran said fatalities included over 1,800 protesters, along with 135 members of the country's security forces. Since the beginning of the unrest, over 16,000 have been arrested. News also broke regarding Irfan Zoltani, a 26-year-old Iranian now allegedly set to be hung on Wednesday. The Iranian government has charged him with the crime of waging war on God. In another announcement via Truth Social, Trump wrote, effective immediately, any country doing business with the Islamic Republic of Iran will pay a tariff of 25% on any and all business being done with the United States of America. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt spoke on the escalating conflict with reporters.
I think one thing President Trump is very good at is always keeping all of his options on the table, and airstrikes would be one of the many, many options that are on the table. Diplomacy is always the first option for the president. However, with that said, the president has shown he's unafraid to use military options if and when he deems necessary, and nobody knows that better than Iran.
President Trump has designated 3 Muslim Brotherhood branches as terrorist organizations. This move will impose new sanctions in an effort to curb the Islamic extremist groups. Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced the official designation in an X post saying, quote, we are designating the Lebanese, Egyptian, and Jordanian chapters of the Muslim Brotherhood. Under President Trump's leadership, the United States will eliminate the capabilities and operations of the Muslim Brotherhood chapters that threaten U.S. citizens and our national security. All 3 branches are linked to Hamas, with the Lebanese branch receiving the harshest designation of foreign terrorist organization. This label criminalizes any material support under federal law.
After failing to appear before the House Oversight Committee to discuss his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, former President Bill Clinton may now be held in contempt of Congress. Daily Wire senior editor Joel Needler reports.
Hillary Clinton was also subpoenaed and is scheduled to appear tomorrow. Both subpoenas were lawful and voted on unanimously by the Bipartisan Oversight Committee led by Chair James Comer. Speaking to reporters after Bill Clinton's no-show, Comer said this.
Jeffrey Epstein visited the White House 17 times while Bill Clinton was president. I've been in Congress 9 years. I think I've been to the White House 9 times in 9 years. And then we know that Bill Clinton flew on Epstein's plane somewhere around 27 times after the presidency. So no one's accusing Bill Clinton of any wrongdoing. We just have questions, and that's why the Democrats voted along with Republicans to subpoena Bill.
After being subpoenaed, the Clintons responded via letter, expressing their intentions not to show. They also predicted being held in contempt, writing, quote, "You are on the cusp of bringing Congress to a halt to pursue a rarely used process literally designed to result in our imprisonment. This is not the way out of America's ills, and we will forcefully defend ourselves."
Minnesota has filed a lawsuit to try to end the ICE operations in their state. Daily Wire reporter Zach Jewell has the story.
Minnesota Democrats are claiming the surge of federal agents was unlawful and that it has caused fear and distress for residents. The Trump administration surged agents in response to the sprawling multi-billion-dollar fraud network associated with the local Somali community. The state is claiming that the staggering fraud allegations are simply a pretext that the Trump administration is using to sow political discord in a blue city as political retaliation. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey denies that the suit is about stopping immigration enforcement. He stated Monday, quote, "We are not asking ICE not to do ICE things. We are asking this federal government to stop the unconstitutional conduct that is invading our streets each and every day." However, the suit does request that the surge of agents be retracted from the city.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent traveled to Minnesota this week to dig into the rampant fraud allegations and did not mince words for its leadership. He blasted Minnesota Governor Tim Walz for refusing to provide security for him at the state's capital amid ongoing protests and a high-profile fraud investigation. Bessent's interview with Chris Rufo there apparently had to be moved to another location because Walz could not guarantee police protection for the secretary. Here's Bessent.
Tim Walz is a coward. He is afraid of what is coming. And he's not going to be able to hide behind this curtain because we will get there. And I don't have to go in the Capitol building to investigate him. I don't want to get out ahead of the investigations. It's going to be very methodical. And Chris, I can guarantee you, when the bear trap snaps, we're going to get these folks.
The Trump administration has ended the temporary protected status for Somalis living in the U.S. Those living here under TPS must now leave by March 17th or face deportation. Secretary Kristi Noem said in a statement, quote, "Temporary means temporary, and that conditions in Somalia have improved to the point that it no longer meets the law's requirement for temporary protected status." That protected status had been in place for close to 35 years, having most recently been extended under President Biden.
The Supreme Court is poised to release a ruling on Trump's tariffs as early as tomorrow. Daily Wire senior editor Cabot Phillips has the latest.
The president voiced concern on Truth Social Monday, saying the country would be, quote, screwed if the Supreme Court rules against his trade policy. The United States collected around $200 billion in tariff revenue last year, and that figure does not include the trillions in capital investments brought in as a result of tariff incentives. If the court rules against the president, the billions of dollars collected would have to be given back. The case centers on questions surrounding the International Emergency Economic Powers Act and whether Trump's tariffs should be considered a tax, which would fall under the authority of Congress. Trump's team is arguing the tariffs are part of emergency powers due to the fentanyl crisis and offshoring of American industry.
The largest power grid operator in the United States is on the verge of crisis. In the 13-state region from New Jersey to Kentucky, covered by the nonprofit PJM, an explosion of new AI data centers threatened to swamp the power market operator. According to the Wall Street Journal, electricity rates are climbing and PJM is already maxing out power supply in high-demand times, leaving a high possibility of rolling blackouts. President Trump said in a Truth Social post on Monday that his administration is working with data center companies to make sure that AI expands without hiking energy costs for Americans.
The state of Nevada is taking the issue of men and women's sports into its own hands. Daily Wire reporter Cameron Arkin has more on the issue and how it's impacting the state's governor's race.
The proposed ballot measure would ban transgender identifying athletes from competing in women's sports and enshrine that ban in the state's constitution. It's likely to be put before voters in November, drawing increased attention to the gubernatorial race. Republican Governor Joe Lombardo announced the measure that would, quote, amend the Equal Rights Amendment to protect fairness and integrity in girls' athletics, particularly regarding public funding. Attorney General Aaron Ford, who is seeking the Democratic nomination for governor, said he does not personally believe athletes who identify as transgender should compete in women's sports, but nevertheless opposes the ballot initiative, according to the Nevada Independent. If the measure gathers enough signatures to qualify for a statewide vote, it would first be on the 2026 ballot as a question, then return to the 2028 ballot for final approval before being added to the Constitution.
And Scott Adams, political commentator and creator of Dilbert, has died at 68. Adams created one of the most widely syndicated comic strips of all time, appearing in over 2,000 papers nationwide. Many of us began to know Scott on a more personal level from his show Real Coffee, where he discussed politics and culture. He sometimes earned public backlash for speaking his mind, but he always took it in stride. For the past year, Scott battled prostate cancer, eventually leaving him unable to walk. Yet he carried on with his show nonetheless, filming from his hospital bed. He's been praised for exemplifying fortitude and courage of conviction in his work, even in the face of death. We pray for Scott and his family.
Those are your drive home updates this evening. To learn more about these stories, go to dailywire.com. And in case you missed it earlier today, we covered some major stories, including positive economic data for the U.S. rolling in, the Supreme Court hearing arguments about men and women's sports, and how Minnesota became the center of a political firestorm. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow morning with another full edition of Morning Wire.